This story is fiction, but it could have happened. During World War II, the Australian government and the Australian military hierarchy were very concerned with the need for secrecy. The secrecy that may have confused the enemy was expected, but secrecy that allayed fears of the civilian population was somewhat a surprise. It is surprising to most Australians that an enormous amount of the secrets, classified documents, etc., were not released until 1996. It is still uncertain if the policy of the Brisbane Line was fact or fiction. This is the story of ordinary people and their lives and loves during this uncertain period of our history.
As the sun set over the headland at Kings Beach, an elderly couple watched as the passenger liner Sun Beauty sailed out to sea on its next voyage. The couple were in the twilight of their lives, and they had shared a beautiful life together. They had earlier that day spent time with their children, grandchildren and their great-granddaughter while they celebrated their 38th wedding anniversary. They shared a bottle of Muscatine, a white wine produced from white muscat grapes grown in Bulleidine, hence the name. A light, easy drinking aromatic semi-sweet white makes it perfect served chilled for that warm summer day picnic. They discovered the wine on a weekend visiting Queensland's Granite Belt wine region, and, at once it became their wine. Later on, the owners of the winery opened an outlet at nearby Mooloolaba, and while he could still drive, he managed to call in about once a month. When the sun had set, he dozed off in his favorite chair, placed to take in the picturesque outlook over the entrance to Moreton Bay. She was comfortable with him dozing off, and she knew he was at peace. Although now in his 80s, they both liked to look back at the uncertain times, at the peak of World War II when they first met, and how over time, their love grew.
Although the population considered Australia to be safe at the start of the war, as Europe and Germany were on the other side of the world, attitudes changed with Japan entering the war. Japan shared the same ocean as Australia. Although Japan and Australia were successful trading parties before the war, with Japan attacking Pearl Harbor, and making menacing overtures towards Singapore, Australia was now at war with Japan. When Darwin was bombed for the first time in February 1942, the government played down the damage to the public. The general population knew nothing of other bombing rates at Broome, Mosman, Derby and even Katherine. After the midget submarine attack on Sydney Harbour in May, it had become impossible to disguise that an impending threat became real. This became even more acute, when rumours began to spread about the Brisbane Line. When it became seriously believed by the government and military, that Japan would attack Australia, it needed to be quickly decided what areas should be protected. Because Australia was a vast island with the majority of the population confined to the southeast, in February 1942, General Ivan Mackay drew a line on the map of Australia. This line stretched from the coast north of Brisbane to west of Melbourne. Although no record of the Brisbane Line was being activated, many believed, and some still do, that the line was implemented and all of the country north and west of the line was to be abandoned. The other item kept from the public, concerned that during the 12 months between May 1942 and May 1943, 25 ships were attacked within 40 miles of the New South Wales coast. The government began to realise that unless they could control panic, large numbers of the population may abandon the major cities like Brisbane. Because of its proximity to the Pacific battlefronts, Brisbane was the crucial point for resupplying the troops in battle. The Americans developed it as a major naval base, including a vast submarine base. In 1942, General MacArthur set up his headquarters for the Pacific in Brisbane. Brisbane needed a civilian population, to make sure the smooth running of so many essential services. The government and the military were in a catch-22 situation. Secrecy needed to be maintained for security, and yet, the population needed to be reassured of their safety. This, compounded by the military distrust of elected politicians, as well as the parliamentarians' need to placate their constituents. A unique approach obviously was needed. the member for Port Macquarie and now the Defence Minister, David Miller, called an urgent meeting of his department heads, to see if a solution could be found. Because of some of the difficulties, the meeting was held in Sydney.
As it happened, in the same hotel that the Defence Department rented rooms, the senior media lecturer at Queensland University was with colleagues in a get-together of their own. Tom Walker was the former editor of a major newspaper who also had extensive experience producing newsreel films. Tom and David were friends from the University of New South Wales, where they both studied. When the Defence Minister ran into the media lecturer in the hallway, they made time to have a few drinks and reminisce about their university days.
It was during this time that the minister started to conceive the basis of how Tom may be able to offer a solution to his problem. Although they realized, the invasion of these cities by the Japanese would be remote, a specialist public relations unit still should be instigated. It could give reassurance through movies, newsreels, and newspaper articles that would show to the civilian population the defences were in place. With Brisbane becoming the headquarters for the Allies' command for the war in the Pacific, it would become necessary to play down the military importance of Brisbane as a target. A byproduct of these films would be to discourage a Japanese invasion, as they would show the Japanese Brisbane was too difficult a city to invade. They finished their talk with Tom agreeing to put a concrete proposal together. He needed to show how it would also work, including the resources needed. This plan was required to be able to be presented to the War Cabinet by the end of the week.
Being the driven person that he was, Tom was able to put the basis of his proposal together in just 2 days. He approached the task as if preparing a lecture for his students. He defined exactly the end achievement needed. What would be the best way of achieving the result? What resources are needed?
He was able to present a written proposal 2 days later. He assembled a team and they quickly settled into the task ahead. Follow their adventures. Witness the romances that developed and be a guest at their weddings. And share the pain of a despicable act.
Meanwhile in London, the Australian military attaché receives orders to return to Australia.
But the plane that he is travelling on crashes off Malaya. And a story of survival. And is rescued by an Australian coast watcher. His rescuer is bitten by a snake and dies. He then takes over the coast watcher's mission.
The Ministry Communications Unit. It is not a war story, it a story of love and adventure that takes place during World War II. You will not be able to put it down.